Congressman Moskowitz described a shocking situation about threat to his life. This is the moment every American should sit up. A constituent with a cache of weapons, a book of hateful screeds, and a target list that included a member of Congress and his place of worship. He was notified, thankfully, and the man is now behind bars.
I'll only say, just because it's important, that I do appreciate the spirit with which you're bringing this forward. And I do think there's a lot of people here who are having these conversations, and they're legitimate. But I would note, and I think, and I'm sorry, I was finishing something in there, but that I believe I'm correct, that not only are the dollars currently attached to the CR and also your amendment, they are not paid for, correct?
That's correct.
And, you know, for me, I don't break from that very often. And so, you know, I'm going to have to take that under advisement on the CR itself on the floor. I know a lot of people view it as peanuts and a $37 trillion debt when you're talking about $88 million in the current bill, and then yours would plus it up 100, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, for me, it's something that we have to break in this town. That whether it's $5 or $5 trillion, we got to figure out how to pay for everything. And I think President Reagan was right that everything should be attached to a tax bill. And everything we propose, it ought to say, all right, well, this is going to be a 0.05% tax increase on Americans to pay for whatever this is in this case. And for me, this is, you know, to benefit members of Congress, and it may be a worthwhile thing. I think we ought to debate it and have a conversation about how the dollars can be used. I think they could be more flexibly used to ensure that we're able to figure out what works for each of us. I live on 10 acres in Texas. That's very different than colleagues who live in Brooklyn or whatever. So I very much appreciate the spirit with which you bring it forward, and we're all trying to, you know, think through all these issues. But I've got some concerns on the spending side, as I share with you privately. So I yield back.
Mr. Roy, can I respond?
Yeah, sure.
So
please.
I just want to give you the state of affairs.
Yeah.
So last year, I had a constituent of mine who was target practicing in his backyard 8 miles from my house. He was a former felon. He had a high-powered rifle similar to the one that was used to kill Charlie Kirk. He had a scope. He had a silencer, body armor, 3,000 rounds of ammunition. His neighbor, his anonymous neighbor, called the police because he heard shots in the backyard. That's the only reason we know about this. It's not someone who ever communicated with my office, not someone who ever sent me an email, no threats online, nothing. Didn't know the guy. When the police arrived, they found that he was a former felon, found all this stuff. They also found a book that was filled with anti-Semitic material. They found a target list, My Name, My Temple. They went into his web history. He was Googling wind resistance and distance and where my wife worked. He got sentenced to 25 years a week ago. When this happened, I was notified by local police. Capitol Police knew about this and never called my office. Not at all. And so I'm trying really hard to explain that we are all in more danger than we are willing to know. Mr. Norman, I get it. It's expensive. And are adding to the debt. I understand. We have all of these problems when it comes to spending money. I don't want to hijack the CR. I just talked to the speaker about it for 30 minutes. But we got to have an up or down vote on the floor on security for ourselves. If we can't solve this, if we can't protect ourselves, how are we going to do anything around here? And so, you know, look, I was willing to trade my vote on the CR, which is a political liability, because I think it's that important to protect ourselves. So maybe the dollar amount's not right. Maybe I don't have it exactly right. Obviously, the CR dropped. I had a couple hours to put this together. But I can't even get a commitment from the speaker to do this. When I met with him in January and went through the failure of Capitol Police to even notify me that a constituent was arrested with a plot to kill me, he told me he would work on it. It took 8 months to get $5,000. And so I'm just trying to figure out how we break the bureaucratic logjam around here, go to the members direct, right? Get out of our leaderships and figure out how we're going to protect ourselves. And so I appreciate the conversation.
And I'll just add this for time's sake, move on just to say, I appreciate that, appreciate the spirit with which you share it. I'm sorry that you all were dealing with that. I'm glad that that individual was prosecuted and now in jail. That's good. We need more of that. But everything's a little different, right? I mean, you know, where I live, you know, a day doesn't go by where someone isn't shooting a gun somewhere, right? There's shotguns and, you know, coyotes getting shot or whatever. So it's kind of like, you know, it's a normal way of life. But my issue is, like, there's restrictions on what we could use the MRA for that might work better for one member than another. And I just worry we're reacting, we're appropriating money, and I think we need a wholesale review of a lot of things in Congress, from stock trading by individual members to salary, to MRA for security and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, whether it's $5 or $5 trillion, we ought to pay for it. I mean, when I stare at ALS victims and cancer victims who want research, and I say, I believe in what you're doing, but we got to pay for this stuff, I got to say the same thing for members of Congress. So with that, I yield back.
But the real story isn't only that one arrest. It's what the interaction reveals about how fragile our systems can be when it comes to protecting public servants, houses of worship, and everyday communities from targeted violence. Moskowitz is understandably furious, but his anger points to two separate failures. First, operational failures in communication and coordination between local police and Capitol or federal security, and second, a political reflex that treats member safety as a budget footnote instead of an imperative. When local law enforcement tells a Congress member about an imminent threat and the Capitol Police or relevant offices don't follow up or don't notify the member's own staff, that's not minor bureaucratic friction. It's a breakdown that leaves lives and institutions vulnerable. This exchange also exposes a recurring tension. How do we balance the real costs of security with the public's right to fiscal responsibility? We have members of Congress saying, "I'll trade my vote to secure protections for staff and places of worship," while others rightly insist that every dollar be paid for. That tension is healthy in a democracy, but it can't be used as an excuse to delay basic protections. Public safety and fiscal prudence are not mutually exclusive. They should be designed to complement one another through transparent, accountable budgeting. There are practical reforms that should come out of moments like this. First, we need mandatory, standardized notification protocols so that when a credible threat is identified, the member, their staff, and the appropriate federal and local law enforcement units are notified immediately and clearly. Right now, the patchwork of local practices means some threats fall through the cracks. A national standard, driven by the Capitol Police, DHS, and local partners, would save time, reduce confusion, and protect lives. Second, congressional security funding should be transparent and subject to clear rules about how it's spent. An up or down vote on a well-defined, costed security package is precisely the sort of accountable governance Moskowitz was asking for. If members believe certain protections are needed, they should put them on the floor with offsets or clear pay-fors. Let voters see the trade-offs and the priorities. Hide nothing behind closed-door allocations or ambiguous allowances. Third, Congress should reform member representational allowances and related funds to remove ambiguity and inequity. There should be uniform criteria for when funds can be used for security, and an independent inspector or ethics office should audit and report publicly on security expenditures so the public can see that dollars are being used to protect people, not to buy perks. Fourth, we need to shore up prevention at the community level. Better threat assessment tools, more robust information sharing between local law enforcement and federal partners, and investments in mental health and violence prevention programs. Most violent plots don't emerge overnight. They're preceded by warning signs. Funding community interventions and behavioral threat assessment teams prevents tragedies long before they require armored responses. Fifth, protect whistleblowers and ensure accountability for those who fail to act. If Capitol Police or any agency knew of a plot and failed to notify, that needs independent review. Officials should be held to a standard of timely, effective communication, especially when lives are on the line. Moskowitz also touched on another honest problem. American lawmakers live varied lives, some on rural property, others in urban apartments, and one-size-fits-all policies don't always work. That's true, but the principle should remain. Members and their staff deserve baseline protections that aren't contingent on geography or personal wealth. Security should not depend on whether a representative can afford private measures or has clout with leadership. It should be a right attached to public service. Finally, this episode reminds us that safety is more than armor or surveillance. It's about democratic norms. If you care about this issue, here are concrete steps you can take. Contact your representative and demand an up or down vote on a transparent congressional security package with clear pay-fors. Ask your senators to support a standardized notification protocol between local and federal agencies. Urge your local police and federal partners to prioritize behavioral threat assessment teams and community-based prevention. And insist on independent audits of congressional security spending. Most violent plots don't emerge overnight. They're preceded by warning signs. Funding community interventions and behavioral threat assessment teams prevents tragedies long before they require armored responses. Fifth, protect whistleblowers and ensure accountability for those who fail to act. If Capitol Police or any agency knew of a plot and failed to notify, that needs independent review. Officials should be held to a standard of timely, effective communication, especially when lives are on the line. Moskowitz also touched on another honest problem. American lawmakers live varied lives, some on rural property, others in urban apartments, and one-size-fits-all policies don't always work. That's true, but the principle should remain. Members and their staff deserve baseline protections that aren't contingent on geography or personal wealth. Security should not depend on whether a representative can afford private measures or has clout with leadership. It should be a right attached to public service. Finally, this episode reminds us that safety is more than armor or surveillance. It's about democratic norms. If you care about this issue, here are concrete steps you can take. Contact your representative and demand an up or down vote on a transparent congressional security package with clear pay-fors. Ask your senators to support a standardized notification protocol between local and federal agencies. Urge your local police and federal partners to prioritize behavioral threat assessment teams and community-based prevention, and insist on independent audits of congressional security spending.